The Australian Labour Party were all set to win the recent elections. That's what the polls consistently said. And they were really psyched. They thought they were going to form the next government. And then it went horribly wrong. Now, in the aftermath, Anthony Albanese, known as Albo, to his mates and supporters and others, he became the new Labour leader. I want to talk to him today about why it went so badly wrong for the Australian Labour Party, how are they going to rebuild, and what does he think about Corbyn's Labour Party? What am I calling you? Albo?
Whatever.
DJ Albo?
No, don't call me that.
That's what people call you.
The only good thing about Tory governments is it produces good music in protest.
Only on odd days like today.
Yeah, you're going DJ, you.
Yeah.
So I've got a scenario which is going to be a big leap of imagination. A Labour Party is on course for victory. That's what the polling seems to show. It's to lose. It's got some good policies, but some would say it lacks an overall narrative, gets defined by its opponents. That's Britain in 2015, when Labour lost the election.
Yeah.
Hasn't the same thing, isn't it quite similar, what just happened?
I think perhaps this might make you feel better. I think it was even worse for us because we'd won every poll, every single poll for 2 years. And with our opponents, they had had 3 prime ministers in 4 years. So chaos on the other side. It was one that we should have been able to nail, and people expected us to. And I think that was part of the problem, was that somehow it was almost like we were positioned as the government and the government was positioned as the opposition. So the whole focus was on us rather than on their chaos, the fact that they don't have any real plans for the economy or social policy or the environment. We haven't had a climate change or energy policy in Australia since 2013. Like, it's quite horrific. And they said, oh, we'll get rid of the price on carbon, and energy prices had come down, but of course they've gone up. They said they'd manage the economy. Debt has doubled. We have economic growth essentially flatlining. We have real wages not keeping up with the costs of living. All of the indicators are that we should have been successful at the election.
But why do you think you lost, if you had one big reason?
I think that we didn't explain well enough what our vision was. We had some really good policies, but put together, they opened us up to a scare campaign. Where we've run into some difficulty is the economy and national security. And the truth is that on both of those, the record of the Conservatives is terrible.
When you say scare campaign, what instantly comes to mind is Murdoch, the role of the Murdoch media.
Sure.
Murdoch has the empire in terms of British democracy, American democracy and Australian democracy has a massive, massive impact. And people talk about the free press, but one man having such a massive control of so much of the media and a huge sway over democracy, I mean, do you not think it's time to challenge that and have proposals to break that empire apart?
Well, in Australia, one of the things that's happening, of course, with new technology, and including this interview, is that is being challenged. One of the concerns that we have in Australia is that in Adelaide and Brisbane, for example, essentially it's a monopoly. You just have their one-paper towns, as are a lot of the regional newspapers along the coast. One of the issues that I'm concerned about, in general, is the polarisation that's happening in politics, with whereby people are getting their information from sources that just reinforce their existing views. So I think the challenge for us in terms of looking at the role of News Limited here is to say, yep, they were biased and they went after us, and to point that out, that was a factor, without looking for an excuse, because that's a given.
The climate emergency, all the scientific evidence shows this is an existential threat facing humanity. Climate denial is something which is, in Australia, one of the few Western democracies, along with the US, where it's still quite mainstream. I mean, do you think Labour could commit to a kind of Green New Deal as has been discussed in places like the US, in Britain, elsewhere?
Yeah, look, I think one of the problems in Australia sometimes is that we shouldn't we do have a bit of cultural cringe sometimes, and the fact that you've got senior people, you know, our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, carrying a lump of coal into the Parliament.
This is coal. Don't be afraid.
The
Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows the rule on props.
It's coal.
As Treasurer, I mean, what was he thinking, you know? And just sort of saying, here we are, it's coal, it won't hurt you. Just this juvenile response is unfortunate because it means that we're getting left behind. So I think part of what we have to do is explain, for example, on renewables, it's not just about changing the energy mix in Australia, it's how we take advantage of everything that goes into a solar panel and battery storage, lithium, all the minerals, everything is produced right here. We're pretty good at innovation. What we're not good at is taking advantage of it.
So the left's mission is not just economic inequality, it's against all forms of oppression in society. Yeah. So, you know, each year you have National Sorry Day on the 26th of May to commemorate the mistreatment of Aborigines, but 1 in 15 kids in Australia are Aborigine, but they make up half of all kids in youth detention centres. Sexism, there was a documentary, Is Australia Sexist?, which showed terrible experiences of sexism faced by women. And on LGBTQ rights, Australia is quite late in terms of equal marriage, for example. So what do you think, I mean, in terms of that all-out war against those forms of discrimination, what are you going to do?
Well, I think one of the things that the left have to do as well is not romanticise the past. Analyse the present as is, but not romanticise. You know, we had a white Australia policy in this country for a long period of time. That was the basis of our migration policy. The first woman elected to the House of Representatives from New South Wales, Jeanette McHugh, into a seat in 1983. 83 years, not a single woman in the Parliament. We now, from New South Wales in terms of the House of Reps, we now are pretty close to 50-50. Indigenous affairs remains a blight. We all suffer, I think, by not even recognising First Nations people in our constitution. But when Kevin Rudd offered the apology, which is what Sorry Day and those issues commemorate, John Howard had refused to do that for a long period of time. When we actually did it, showed leadership, it brought the country together, and some people, some prominent Conservatives, you know, walked out of Parliament, but by and large it was a very amazing day. Like, schools stopped and watched. So I have a great deal of faith in terms of advancing equality across the board. When I first got elected to Parliament, the first private member's bill I did was superannuation rights for same-sex couples to remove the discrimination there. And it was only, you know, not that long ago, but, you know, in that term between 1996 and 1998, in the caucus room, people were shuffling in their seats because someone was talking about sexuality and discrimination. And today we have marriage equality. One of the things that we did was remove discrimination from 84 pieces of legislation with the Rudd government. That was all fought for and campaigned on. We still have massive high rates of domestic violence in this country against women in particular. These are all big, big issues. It's only ever Labor that confronts them and makes those changes. You'll hear people say, the Labor Party's not what it used to be. No, we don't support the White Australia policy anymore. That's a good thing.
Bit of an improvement.
That's a good thing.
Just to wrap up, Corbyn's Labour, do you have good relations with them? And there could be an election in Britain this year because the country's basically a burning skip at the moment. Does that? I'm just being honest. Skip. I mean, it is though. Come on, it is.
It is. From a distance, it's just like I was over there for the Brexit vote in March, and it was just extraordinary. But I have good relations with a whole bunch of people. With Jeremy, I know quite well. We've met a number of times when we've been over there. Talked not just about politics, but cricket and other things as well.
He likes to talk about cricket.
He does like talking about cricket. You know, we have very similar histories, of course, and our origins are very much related to British Labor. they're different countries though. I don't think you can translate what's appropriate in one country to another, but what you can do, I think, is have a look as well at some of the campaigning techniques. I think that, for example, the social media that British Labor does when it is pretty effective that I've seen in terms of the messaging, using real people as well, not just politicians, to get that message and to campaign out there. So,
And having a mass movement as well.
oh, absolutely. And part of what's happened with building the base of the party over there has been phenomenal. And that's one of the things that my first speech accepting the leadership here, I called upon people to join. And one of the things that we've got to do is to build that so that we're able to campaign, and that those people, of course, are people who can sell the message and the policies in workplaces, at PNCs, at the footy, at the pub, wherever they're engaged.
Cheers, Albo. That was great.
Thanks, mate.
Nice one. I really like the guy. His mates call him authentic, and you can see that. He's got a kind of relatability about him. You can imagine going for a pint with him down the pub. It's interesting to see what happens with the Australian Labor Party. I think their future at the moment, the direction they take, is very, very much up for grabs. But I want to hear your thoughts, so do leave your comments. If you get any ideas for who we should talk to, always keen to hear them as ever. As ever, subscribe. I'll see you next time.